Are you sure?
Here's the 30-second lesson on what legends know. Never ask a bride why she's getting married. Don't wear a skirt on a windy day. Deodorant is not a shower. Don't sniff chili flakes. And don't forget, saving is not investing. Legends don't just save, they invest in mutual funds. Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
The death of the merchant ship was barely noticed, except in the shipping news. En route from Port of Spain to Durban, the 122-meter BBC China had run into the rocks off the wild coast near Port Grosvenor, one of a handful of accounts records, and had to be completely scrapped. The year before, in 2003, a constellation of Central Intelligence Agency spy satellites had been focused on the ship as the BBC China made its way from Penang to Dubai, and then it began its journey through Suez, headed for Libya. Locked in the containers on the ship's decks were hundreds of centrifuges meant to process the raw material for nuclear bombs. Hi, and thank you for joining this episode of ThePrint Explorer. Earlier this week, the United States announced the latest in a long series of sanctions on companies involved in supplying Pakistan's ballistic missile program, as well as the state-owned National Development Complex, which produces them. Ballistic missiles, as many of you will know, are designed, among other things, to carry nuclear weapons to their targets. The story behind the American sanctions is pretty well known. In 2003, when the CIA forced the BBC China to dock at Taranto in Italy, it provided the world with hard evidence that the Pakistani scientist Abdul Qadir Khan had been selling rogue nations nuclear weapons technology. Khan had been one of the critical figures in helping Pakistan buy the technology it needed to become a nuclear weapons power, an issue we've gone through in an earlier episode of Explorer. Little imagination is needed to know why the United States is cracking down on Pakistan's ballistic missile program today. Following the wars in Israel and Ukraine, the damage these weapons can inflict is no secret. Tomorrow's ballistic and hypersonic missiles could be able to punch holes through even the most advanced defensive technologies. And no one wants a situation where economically imploding Pakistan sells its tech to dysfunctional nations or terrorist groups. That isn't the story I want to look at today, though. Instead, I'll examine the remarkable but little-known story of how the Khan network was actually brought down. The story wasn't all about spy satellites. It was about a man called Urs Tinner, as well as his father Friedrich and his brother Marco, and the Central Intelligence Agency. Urs Tinner had actually helped manufacture the centrifuges that were found packed inside the containers on the BBC China. But he was also the spy, strangely enough, who helped the CIA dismantle the AQ Khan network. Without Urs Tinner, there may never have been the evidence needed to put in place the sanctions regime we're now discussing. For this episode of Explorer, I've drawn extensively on the authoritative work of the nuclear expert David Albright, who literally wrote the book on the global secret arms trade. Another great resource was a book on the AQ Khan case by Catherine Collins and Douglas France. The journalist Gordon Carrera has also written a fantastic account of the nuclear black market, to which I'm also indebted. The CIA had actually known about Khan since at least 1975, when he had been working for a Dutch civilian nuclear technology firm called Urenco. The Netherlands Intelligence Service have developed suspicions about Khan's activities, but the country's political leaders had been hesitant to authorize his arrest, fearing what the fallout of the exposure of spying in Urenco might be on its commercial activities. The Dutch intelligence services approached the CIA hoping for help to persuade the politicians, only to discover their American partners actually wanted to do nothing. The CIA was skeptical that Pakistan, which barely made bicycles of its own at that point, would ever be able to build a nuclear bomb. They thought it would be better to keep a discreet eye on Khan's activities and see what they could learn about Pakistan's intentions. Khan was thus able to return to Pakistan fleeing arrest, where he would help realize Prime Minister Zulfikar Ali Bhutto's plans to build a nuclear bomb and thus insulate Pakistan from the kind of crisis it faced in 1971 with the secession of Bangladesh. Friedrich Tinner had been one of Khan's closest friends at Urenco, which he dealt with as the in charge of exports for a German company called Vakuum Apparat Technik, or VAT. Khan had been involved in buying vacuum valves from VAT through Tinner not long after he began building his government financed enrichment complex at Kahuta. Friedrich, though, didn't have a very long run. When the CIA identified nuclear related shipments of technology from VAT to Pakistan, Friedrich was forced to leave the company, though nothing very much else happened. Later, however, Friedrich returned home to Switzerland and set up his own company called CTEC. The equipment CTEC produced had many applications in the civilian sector. Its real market, however, was the Pakistani government project to enrich uranium to the levels needed to make nuclear bombs. Friedrich resumed his dealings with Khan's laboratory in Kahuta, sheltered by very permissive Swiss export regulations. America did begin to get worried, the archival documents show us, and imposed its first sanctions on Pakistan in April 1979. 8 months later, though, the sanctions were lifted after the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan. To President Jimmy Carter and his national security advisor, it seemed that fighting the Cold War was much more important than stopping Pakistan's nuclear program. Part of that was just racism, the assumption that this third world country just wouldn't be able to build a bomb. And part was obviously geopolitics. Congress annually appropriated funds for a 6-year, $3.2 billion program of economic and military assistance to Pakistan, much like, and I'll discuss more of this later, like the 5-year multi-billion-dollar program requested by the Bush administration from the period 2005 to 2009 after 9/11. Despite Washington's periodic warnings to Islamabad, though, companies connected with Pakistan's nuclear program were caught pretty regularly trying to export dual-use materials such as kryptrons, which are used to trigger nuclear explosions, as well as specially hardened steel required for the fabrication of these bombs. By 1987, the CIA even knew Khan had begun to turn from importer to exporter. He negotiated the sales of equipment to Iran for its nuclear enrichment program, as well as to Saddam Hussein's Iraq. That year, Khan took his first steps towards nuclear technology proliferation, offering Iran a disassembled sample of Pakistan's P-1 centrifuge, drawings, descriptions, specifications for production, and calculations for building a complete plant. He offered materials for 2,000 centrifuge machines, as well as auxiliary vacuum and electric drive equipment. Iran did not purchase everything on Khan's list, opting instead to procure some of the items themselves from various suppliers Khan had introduced them to. The deal eventually closed for some $3 million, which doesn't sound like a lot, but remember this is decades ago. Eventually, P-1 type centrifuges sold by Khan were identified by inspectors at Iran's Natanz facility, and Tehran's negotiators turned over to the International Atomic Energy Agency the names of their suppliers, which identified Khan as one of them. Heinz Mebus, a German engineer and businessman and a college friend of Khan, was named as one of the suppliers who'd been acting as a middleman for his old college friend. 3 years after the Iran sales, in 1990, the Khan network approached Iraq with a similar offer to supply enrichment technology and project designs. A 1990 memo found by United Nations weapons inspectors details a meeting between Iraqi intelligence officers and an intermediary for AQ Khan. The memo lists an asking price of $5 million for the network's assistance, plus an additional 10% commission on all procurement. The war in Afghanistan had raged on until 1988, remember, so for most of this period, America kept turning a blind eye to Khan's activities. It just didn't seem that important, though the warning signs were piling up. Towards the end of 1998, Friedrich Tinner and Khan traveled to Casablanca to meet with emissaries of the despot Muammar Gaddafi's regime. The Libyans were interested in placing a turnkey order to set up a secret gas centrifuge plant, which would let that country refine uranium to weapons grade. Khan told the Libyans that he was having problems getting a centrifuge manufacturing workshop up and running in Dubai, but he promised the challenges would be managed. This was the Khan network's biggest deal up till then, and he was determined not to let his customers walk away. What the participants at that meeting didn't know is that they were being overheard by the United Kingdom's Foreign Intelligence Service, MI6. An MI6 agent, it turns out, got close enough to Tinner to drop a miniature electronic eavesdropping device in the pocket of his suit. For the next several days, the British spies were able to overhear almost every detail of the negotiations over the Libyan nuclear project. Later, the eavesdroppers heard the Pakistani scientist tell his friend that he needed someone to help with technical knowledge to get the centrifuge production going at the volumes required. Friedrich's younger son, Marco, was technically proficient and had a small import export company of his own. But lonely and depressed after a divorce and battered by a bitter child custody case, as well as various tax problems, Urs Timmermann wanted a change of scene. In 1998, Urs moved to Dubai to help with the nuclear project. Together with Khan's chief aide, a Malaysian national called Buhari Sayyid Abu Tahir, Urs became a critical figure in the Libya project. Exactly what happened next is unclear, but the CIA seems to have made its move sometime around 2000. Urs, it said, was approached by a CIA agent in Dubai and threatened with severe legal consequences if he did not cooperate and pass on information on exactly what was going on. There's some suggestion that Urs began to work around this point as a paid but highly uncooperative CIA source. The young scientist's lack of enthusiasm was probably rooted in fear of what it would mean for his family, which had earned upwards of $12.5 million from the Khan network between 1997 and 2003. In 2000, a top secret meeting was convened by President Bill Clinton to debate options to act against the network as the evidence poured in. The CIA argued for patience, saying its sources would be able to reveal the whole picture if they were given time. Thus, as Khan set up a centrifuge production facility in Malaysia, which sourced components through its network of fake companies across Asia and Africa, the CIA and MI6 continued to quietly gather information. Led by an operative using the wonderful code name Mad Dog, the CIA also used some pretty direct means when its sources didn't come through. In 2003, a CIA team of 6 women and men illegally broke into the Tinner home in Switzerland and stole data from their computers. Among other things, the agents found digitized blueprints and manufacturing manuals for P1 centrifuges, the ones sold to Iran, as well as even more advanced P2 centrifuges, as well as drawings of nuclear weapons and instructions on how to make them. Finally, they had all the proof they needed. Likely, the CIA also used some other means to make the family come clean. A Swiss journalist later found a copy of a $1 million written agreement signed on June 21, 2003, between Marco and 2 CIA agents who used the false names W. James Kinsman and Sean D. Mahaffey. When cash didn't work, the CIA had other means at its disposal. Secret agents left a warning letter at the home of Gotthard Lurch, a German with close links to Khan. Written in about February 2002, the letter warned him not to sell the P2 centrifuge design to Iran in cooperation with Urs and Marco, as well as other German and Arabic accomplices of the network. The letter threatened, and I quote, grave consequences if Lurch proceeded. It was signed, "Your sincere friends," and continued, "We will come to talk to you to work out a deal for both parties' interests. From June 16 until June 25, 2003, the Americans finally called in the Tinners, holding daily meetings to interrogate them at a hotel in Liechtenstein. At night, they adjourned for drinks and dinner, which was all part of the intelligence strategy for creating in the Tinners the sense that they were all playing on the same team. The Tinners were asked in painstaking detail about the shipments they'd made to Iran, Libya, and elsewhere. The Tinners admitted at those meetings to providing components and designs to Libya, explaining where the components were manufactured and exactly how they were shipped using false invoices and other deceptions. Khan, interestingly, seems to have been stunned by the Tinners' betrayal. The nuclear businessman had been a very frequent visitor to the Tinner household in Switzerland over the years and had come to know the entire family. In 2008, Khan told the Italian journalist Stefania Morizzi that claims that Urs Tinner had become a CIA agent do not ring true. He stated that the Tinners were a, I quote, proud, educated family and Urs would never have betrayed his father, brother, and other friends. He just couldn't ever conceive that Friedrich and Friedrich's younger son might also have betrayed him, which I guess is a lesson. Ultimately, there's no honor among thieves. The question that's never really been answered is how much the government of Pakistan knew about Khan's network. That's a question the Tinners had no answer to. The relationship between these two parties was obviously very close since Khan was part of the Pakistan government's nuclear bomb program. Less certain, though, is exactly who in the government knew about his sales program and who knew it. In 1982, an unnamed Arab country, possibly Saudi Arabia, it's just a wild guess, was thought to have reached out to Khan asking for his assistance to make a nuclear weapon. The deal, though, is believed to have been shot down after a colleague informed the government of Pakistan about the offer made to Khan. That suggests, at least at that point, someone very powerful wasn't wanting this nuclear market to flourish. General Zia-ul Haq, on the other hand, was very explicit about what he meant to do with the nuclear weapons Khan was helping him build. In 1986, Pakistan's military ruler told an interviewer, I quote, "It is our right to obtain the technology, and when we obtain this technology, the Islamic world will possess it with us." It's conceivable like Khan, who, like Zia, seemed to be a political Islamist and a religious zealot, thought he was doing the Islamic world a favor by selling nuclear components. Large numbers of other politicians also helped put together the illegal nuclear trafficking network that underpinned the Khan network, even though there's no evidence they actually played a role in the deals. In 1993, Prime Minister Benazir Bhutto, who of course regarded herself as the mother of Pakistan's missile program, traveled to Pyongyang and secured the transfer of Nodong missile technology on behalf of A.Q. Khan. The bombs A.Q. Khan was building, needed a solid fuel rocket to make them deliverable to their targets, and Pakistan at that stage had no missile which could do it. In return for that deal, Benazir is said to have brokered the transfer of nuclear bomb technology, uranium enrichment technology, which eventually helped North Korea build a deliverable nuclear weapon. This we know for a fact. Pakistan continued to be a hub of nuclear black market operations even after the Khan network was detected. Early in 2004, Asher Karni, a former Israeli military officer and military technology trader who resides in South Africa, was arrested for selling American dual-use technology to Pakistan. Karni used a bogus South African company to acquire triggered spark gaps, that's high-speed electrical switches that can be used as detonators for nuclear weapons as well as rocket motors, and separating the different stages of missiles. Karni was obviously unaware that his movements were being monitored by the CIA, and that the equipment that he'd been selling had actually been rendered useless by the manufacturer Perkin-Elmer Optometrics. And in February 2004, the Washington Post reported that Khan had told a friend and a senior investigator that top Pakistani military officers, including General Musharraf, had known about Khan's assistance to North Korea's uranium enrichment efforts. Khan himself reportedly told investigators that General Mirza Aslam Beg, army chief from 1988 to 1991, was aware of the assistance he was providing to Iran, and I quote, two other army generals, in addition to Musharraf, knew and approved of his efforts on behalf of North Korea. One of these former army chiefs, General Jahangir Karamat, was, of course, Pakistan's ambassador to the United Nations from 2004 on. There's no way to know the truth for sure because America never pursued these cases at the time. As I said, it needed General Musharraf's cooperation in the post 9/11 war on terrorism in Afghanistan, just as it had needed the help of General Zia a generation earlier. Another reason we've maybe never got to the bottom of this story is that nobody really paid much of a price for what they did. Henk Slebos, a Dutch engineer and businessman who had studied metallurgy with Khan at Delft University and sold him his equipment, received 6 months probation. Ernst Piffel, another member of the network, was convicted and sentenced to 3.5 years in Germany in 1998 for supplying nuclear centrifuge parts through his company Team GmbH. For their part, the Tinners received criminal sentences of between 24 and 50 months from the Swiss. The CIA had done its best to protect them, including destroying critical evidence. Swiss prosecutors, though, refused to back down. The sentences, though, were offset against time already served while under trial. To many people, and I have to say I'm one of them, the fallout from the Khan case might not seem just punishment for people who exposed hundreds and of thousands of people, perhaps millions, to the prospect of incineration in a nuclear war. Who knows what North Korea might do tomorrow or what might happen in the event of a war with Iran in the future? Khan himself spent time under house arrest in 2004. 5 years later, he was let out of jail and remained a hero in his homeland until his death in 2011. Pakistan is maybe perhaps beginning to pay the price for the crimes it committed. Will that mean an end to the nuclear black market? Time will tell. I'm Praveen Swami and I'm a contributing editor to ThePrint. Thank you for watching this episode of Security Code.